or Beasley Media Group.
Come on, everybody, it's time to rise up. We're living in a world and there's some crazy stuff happening. We need resolution. We have the power, we need restitution. First, we need to talk about how to begin. We're all in this together, feel free to chime in. This is Conversation Unplugged. Conversation Unplugged. Conversation Unplugged. Conversation Unplugged. This is Conversation Unplugged.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. You're listening to Rev Dr. Benita Weathers on Conversation Unplugged on WWDB 860 AM in Philadelphia, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, The Real in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a blessing to greet you another day on this Thursday. It's glad to be alive. Wow, there's so much going on. Elections have passed, and all those who are running for office been elected. So we'll be waiting to see what the outcome of some of the elections are. But that's not why we're here today. This is a very special interview for me. I got my best friend on, Benita Weathers, my wife. We've been together for 27 years, 26 of those years in matrimony, 27 of those years total as a couple. Now, I'm going to say Reverend Weathers, Benita, but at home, I say babe. Amen. So, yeah. So I got to
say that here too.
Yeah, I'm going to be professional. Mrs. Weathers, how you doing? How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Mr. Weathers. How are you?
Doing good. So, Mrs. Weathers, while our listeners are listening on the radio show today, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am Rev Benita Weathers. by day, I am a senior research project manager at the University of Pennsylvania. By night, I run my own consulting business in which we help our clients to to produce what's inside of them in three different ways. One, I'm a public health consultant. I work with universities that are working to develop health educational programs for communities. I'm also a life coach, and I'm also an editor. So I edit books and dissertations and the like. So that's a little bit about me. But one thing I'm really passionate about is mental health. And I'm really passionate about making mental health care a family affair and starting to have conversations about mental health in our communities and in our families.
Wow. Now, so you don't get in trouble. You are a mother of 3 children, Jasmine,
yes,
James, and Caleb.
3 wonderful children, yes.
And a godson, Norman Land.
And a godson.
Because we'll definitely get in trouble because I can hear the children now. How in the world are you going to have an interview and you're not even going to mention that you got children and a godson? We would definitely, now that they've turned 21, it just seems like they think we the parents. No, they the parents and we the children. So, well, great introduction. You are the author of a second. You are an author and you've published your second book, and it's gaining traction. And the book is called The Scream Within: Mental Health and Clergy Marriages, The Journey of a Pastor's Spouse by Reverend Benita Weathers. Now, the cover of the book, was designed by our nephew, Willard Johnson Jr. out of Washington, D.C. So I know the catalyst behind, the inspiration and the catalyst behind the book. But let's dig a little bit deeper and talk about what was the motivation that inspired you to write this book.
What inspired me to write this book is that being the caregiver or spouse or loved one of somebody who is, as you say, is at war with depression or battles with depression, their depression doesn't just affect them. It also affects those who love them. It affects their families, and it impacts other relationships. And I hadn't really seen much out there from the perspective of ways in which depression, a person's depression impacts the person who cares for them. Mm-hmm. And also, I hadn't seen anything out there from the perspective of a pastor's spouse. And it's something that in the church, we are starting to talk about mental health more in the church, and I'm really happy about that. But there's still work to be done in that area to destigmatize. There's still communities of people in the Christian faith who believe that if you get mental health care, that you have a lack of faith. Mm-hmm. So I really want to dispel that. And I also wanted to write from a more of a family kind of perspective, because we don't talk about mental health and its impact on families. So, all of those reasons are reasons that are sort of the impetus of having written the book. I just hadn't really seen anything out there. And I felt like if I could be vulnerable and transparent, that it could hopefully help somebody else to do the same thing, and to rather than scream within, rather than having to feeling like they need to hold it in, that they can actually scream without. They can actually get it out and actually feel like they have that they're not alone.
So there's an elephant in the room it's really not an elephant, but I just want to use that to segue in. So when you talk about the scream within, mental health and clergy marriage is a journey of a pastor's spouse. I want those who are watching us through Facebook, as well as listening to us on the radio, to understand that the spouse you were speaking about, or the journey, not speaking about the spouse, which you were taking this journey on, is me, one who has been at war with depression for a long time. And one who, how can I put this? One who would not acknowledge that I was at war with depression, and one who, for a certain period of time in our marriage, refused to get therapy because of the stigma that's attached to getting a therapist, and also being a pastor. That's a no-no, within
right.
various church communities and everything. So in our marriage, when did you begin to identify that there was something mentally challenging with me as we were going through this journey called matrimony?
Yeah, I think pretty early in our marriage, probably within like the first couple of years, where you really started to open up about some things, some traumas that you had experienced. And at that point, there were just things that I felt powerless to really do anything about. I really didn't feel like I had the skills necessary to really help you navigate those waters. And I felt like somebody who has been trained and who is a licensed professional would be a better source for you to help you get through those traumas that you were dealing with. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty early on in our marriage.
Wow. So you said in your book, yeah, I've been reading your book. You said in your book.
I'm glad.
Yeah. That's a journey. That was a journey really to get to the point to read the book. You said in regards to the relationship, I'm backtracking here. I'm not going to read all, because if I start reading it all, then people won't go out and buy the book. It's like, yo, I can just listen to the interview. But you start out saying, I saw a strong and brilliant man with various gifts and talents that could take him wherever he so desired. He was a drummer, a playwright, a poet, a songwriter, a hip hop artist who has a knack for thinking profoundly, providing deep insight about various topics. He was also a masterful preacher and teacher, I could see all of this in him so clearly, yet he could not see any of these characteristics in himself. Where others would use charm and swagger to BS, yes, I said BS, their way through life, he had integrity and chose not to forfeit that for things the world tends to desire. Still, he did not see the qualities in himself. Why can't he see in himself what I see, what God sees? That's powerful. That's powerful. Can you walk the listener through your frame of mind going through that journey and writing this part of the book as well?
Yeah, I think, you know, from the when we first met, even though when we first met, I was at a place in life where I really wasn't interested in a relationship. I had just gotten out of one.
Trauma in my life. That's where the depression started. That's where I should have got a therapist right then and there. No, okay, let me get serious. Go ahead.
No, but I was just, I was at a place where I had just gotten out of a relationship, and I was just not in a space where I really wanted to even think about getting into another relationship. I was also in the throes of applying to graduate school. I knew that I would be moving away from the Baltimore, which is where we met. I knew I was going to be moving out of the city. And so I really didn't want to embark on a new relationship at a time where I knew I was going to be leaving. And also, I just didn't want the drama of a relationship at that point in life. However, as we got to know each other and as we started to form a friendship and just all of the many conversations that we had, I started to really see the giftedness in you, the multi-giftedness in you. And even going to see the play that you wrote and produced and acted in, and just you just had a myriad of gifts that as once we kind of started into a relationship and then ultimately got married, in some ways it felt like you didn't see that in yourself. And there were things that you would say sometimes, like when I did go to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for my master's in public health. And when we were walking the campus and you would say things like, I can never go to a school like this. And I'm like, why? Well, who told you that? Mm-hmm. And so there were little things like that you would say that would make me see that you don't see in yourself what I saw and what I believe God saw, because I believe that those things are qualities that God placed inside of you as a part of your purpose. Right. So, that part of the book really is where I didn't really understand why you couldn't see the giftedness inside of you. And you seem to be harder on yourself than I felt like you should be. And I felt like you didn't see one of the things that attracted me to you the most was your mind. You have a great mind.
You know what I met you? I used
the arms, yes.
I went to the gym. I know we got to go on a station break, but you remember that circus we went to and we were just platonic friends. I'll never forget that. You was like, that's one thing I like about a guy is the arms, because I was some little teenagers. Man, when I used to go to the gym, I was working out on the chest, the leg, the chest and one day, and the arms one day, and the legs the next day. It was like 3 days a week. But you were going to North Carolina. I was like, she ain't gonna be my girl, but she gonna see these arms.
And I did. I saw that. Yeah. But the arms, yes. But your mind, the fact that we could have so many great conversations and we could talk about just a myriad, just anything from a crazy show to politics to religion, to just we could talk about a lot of different things. And that really attracted me. And I
make it real dating also. Whoever I was dating, whoever you may have been going out on a date with, we would talk about it just as platonic friends.
Right. Yeah. So we really became friends. And as corny as it sounds, I say this a lot on interviews, but we really are, best friends who happen to be married to each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and which is one thing I think that helps to keep our marriage so strong. But yeah, so, you know, I wanted to somehow, I wished at that time that I could somehow show you yourself, you know, in the many qualities that you had. And I couldn't, I felt powerless to do that. And so really, I kind of, in some ways, I felt like a failure, you know, just as a wife at that point, that I couldn't help you to see that. And therefore, because you couldn't see that, you also didn't seem to be happy. I felt like I couldn't make you happy, you know, and I write about that too. So, let's take
a pause right there, because I want to pick back up, but we need to go on a station break on Conversation Unplugged on WWDB 860 AM, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, Atlanta, Georgia. We're going on a 30-second station break.
You're listening to Conversation Unplugged on WWDB with Reverend Dr. Wayne Weathers, brought to you by Lancaster Bible College, Capital Seminary, and Graduate School. LBC Philadelphia location has programs for busy working adults in accounting, business, Bible, communication, ministry, community transformation, and social engagement, human services, criminal justice, healthcare management, and more. Connect with LBC and Capital Seminary today by visiting lbc.edu/Philly or call 215-280-6339.
We're back on Conversation Unplugged on WWDB 860 AM, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, Atlanta, Georgia, The Real. You're on Conversation Unplugged. I'm the host, Reverend Dr. Wayne Weathers, with my beautiful guest. She's probably the only guest I call beautiful. Here with my beautiful guest, my best friend for 27 years, who is my wife, Reverend Benita L. Weathers. Wow. Yeah, you shared a lot. I remember that journey like it was yesterday, and you know, and I've evolved. Wow, the metamorphosis took years, and so, and I need to say this just for the record: those who battle with depression are not weak. So don't think that if you criticize somebody with depression, it's going to cause them to go into a pit, or if you brush up on them, that they could be taken advantage of. That is not the case for people who are battling with depression. People who battle with depression, there's some traumatic events that's happened in their lives, that certain things trigger an emotional down spiral, you know, and one of the worst things you can do is deny it, that it's happening. And so I remember that's when you talked about, you know, when we was walking UNC's campus, I remember like it was yesterday, August 1994. I remember that it was a couple of weeks after we moved you to North Carolina, your siblings and myself. And that day I remember, because one of the most traumatic events is being told by certain Black folks, you know, my people, that your A at Chester High is nothing but a C at suburban white schools. You know what I mean? And the impact of a statement like that, and, you know, not scoring over 600 on the SAT, making me feel like I'm inferior. And then to have Black folks tell you that your A at Chester High is nothing but a C at a suburban white school. It wasn't all Black folks, it was maybe 2 or 3. But when you're an adolescent at that age and they tell you that stuff, it penetrates your mind and make you think that you are lesser than when God says that I made you lower than an angel. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's true. I mean, you know, words really do have power. Life and death really does lie in the power of the tongue. And one of the things that my mom always said to us growing up was, don't ever count yourself out. And so I took that literally, and I took that everywhere that I went, you know, even in cases where I may have felt that I won't get accepted, I would always say, I'm at least going to try. And if I don't make it, then it either wasn't meant for me, or I'll try again, or hey, it's their loss. And then I'll toss up the deuces. But you know, and so that is something that I live by, and that's something that we also raised our kids with, that mentality that, you know, you don't ever count yourself out, because you got a whole world out there that's going to do that. And so you can't do that to yourself. You have to press forward, and you have to at least give it a try, and keep pushing.
Mm-hmm. So in this journey, right, you wrote the book, The Scream Within. You wrote the book, The Scream Within. I have a couple of questions before I get back to the book. In this journey with me, as I'm battling depression or at war with depression, and you providing a safe haven for our children as I'm at war with depression. And the reality is we all were at war. We all were at war. What mechanisms did you put in place to avoid yourself spiraling into depression while I'm battling depression?
So sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I went there with you, even if I didn't show it, because one of the things that I've been saying a lot about our journey, and just about people who have depression and those who care for them. A person who is going through depression can't hide it. A person who really suffers from, or I won't say suffers, is at war with depression or battles depression, can't hide it. And so there would be times that you might think that you're hiding it by, like leaving the house and going to the office or something, and or going down in the basement, or you just kind of cut yourself off. But that in and of itself kind of cued to us that you're having a bout of depression.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is where the title comes from. The Scream Within comes from the fact that there were many times that I didn't protect myself from being depressed myself about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just kept it bottled in, because in particular with having 3 young children who already were noticing that you were dealing with something. They didn't know what to call it. They would just be kind of like, what's going on with Dad? Like, is that okay? And then I would have to just try to put on that face to help them through. Oh yeah, he's fine. It's a lot going on, and then I would just try to distract them, play games with them, read, do, whatever, to just kind of distract them. But as I say in the book, I would go put them to bed and go in the room, lock the door, and cry.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because when you're down, I could feel that. I could feel that energy. We are one, and I'm down. One, because I don't want to see you depressed, and 2, because there's nothing I can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's absolutely nothing I can do in and of myself to bring you out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I learned after a while was that, I talk about this in the book too, is that I can't take that trip. There are times where when I know that you're having a bout of depression, I have to then turn my attention somewhere else. So I'll have to, one, I pray. I believe in the power of prayer very strongly. So I do that. But I also will either, I might meditate and do some deep breathing. I might listen to some music, or just look at one of those, my little corny black and white shows you always tease me about from back in the day. One of my little old school shows.
Yeah, that's true. Also, yeah, Twilight Zone. Yeah, you know how many sessions?
Twilight Zone, yes.
Yeah, you know how many therapy sessions I had to get after watching the Twilight Zone. That's traumatic. No, it's not.
You watched the Twilight Zone all of like once.
Because it's come on at midnight. That's why.
Yeah. But yeah, so things, just something mindless, something that could really sort of distract me and take me on a different journey than where you were with the depression, because it got to a place where it was like, it won't serve our home, right, if both of us are taking that trip together. And so even though we're one, there's some trips that we can't take together, and that's that's one of those. And so that, I had to learn that and just learn how to redirect my focus, and know that, even though I couldn't in and of myself bring you out, that I could say, did you make an appointment with your therapist?
Yeah.
I could, and I could continue to lift you up in prayer as always. So those were because of my ways of dealing with it.
So just vividly, so someone may question, wow, was he depressed all the time? No, but there were certain transitions and triggers. So when we got married, I always had the image of the prince and the princess. You got me. Cinderella really messed everybody up, over the male as well. And in the process of us getting married, I lost my job. I lost my job. It was contract management. Mary, I lost the contract with this particular account. So as a result, I got laid off. And I was happy that I was getting married to you. You're the love of my life, my best friend. But I was feeling less than a man because, at that time, this whole this westernized type of masculinity says that you got to be the man to bring the bread in the house, So when we got married, bottom line is I was unemployed, and you still was willing to marry me. And that's why I love you so much that, got the ring. Well, maybe you just did it because you got the ring. No. So, ring on the finger, looks like I have a good career with Marriott, and it just stopped abruptly. You know what I mean? And no one taught anyone about grief. That you think about grief, you think grief is just death. But no one teaches you that grief is a loss. And how do you process that loss? And so that particular traumatic experience then start triggering the inadequacies I was feeling growing up, with the low self-esteem and the insecurity, and folks making me feel like I was nothing. They saw the gifts in me, but you know how people have to dominate you to build their self-esteem because they have insecurities as well, Exactly. So it was those particular patterns. So by the time, we get married and everything, and then expecting our first child, I'm feeling less than a man because you're in grad school. I'm collecting an unemployment check, right? I had a baby on the way. And when I get to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, after 5 years of management experiences, they're offering me a job less than $7 an hour. Yeah. So
that's very that's very traumatic. And just to I just want to say, yes, I still married you, but I married you because I knew that you weren't the type of dude just be sitting around with your feet up on my couch. I knew that you were going to be working hard. I knew you were going to be working hard, and that you weren't always going to be in that place. And so, which was true. So.
You don't know.
If I thought it was going to be the other way, I might have made a different decision.
I had the feet up on the couch.
Not after. Only after you had pounded the pavements.
Yeah. Lord knows I was pounding that pavement when I got to North Carolina. So I wanted to give that vivid illustration, and then before we go on station break, because I don't want anyone. I'm not qualifying it because I'm very secure within myself at this stage in life. But I don't want to give a vivid picture that, the depression was like, it was just always depression. There were certain things that triggered. And when you talked about me going in the basement and things of that nature, that was the time that there was just a lot of battles going on in the church that I was once pastoring. And the visceral attacks, attacks on my preaching, attacks on my credibility, attacks on my character, everything. Every other pastor did things great, but I did not. It fed into, again, that childhood trauma. And there's other childhood traumas I just choose not to talk about, but it fed into that. Well, excuse me, I choose not to talk about on air. It just fed into the inadequacies of you're not good enough, because That is another traumatic experience that I've had, you know, among certain family members. I said certain family members, as well as those with whom I grew up around, that made you feel like you wasn't good enough. So those are some of the triggers at that particular time, which you cannot trigger now, because some person will see this on Facebook and says, oh, let me just make him think he's not good enough to cause him to go into depression. That is not going to happen. Much therapy has put mechanisms in place to stop that, because I'm real
absolutely
pure in who I am as a servant of God. So all that being said, I want to get back to the book. We'll get back to the book after our station break. You're listening to Conversation Unplugged on WWDB 860 AM in Philadelphia, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, The Real, Atlanta, Georgia. 30-second station break.
You're listening to Conversation Unplugged on WWDB with Reverend Dr. Wayne and Weathers, brought to you by Lancaster Bible College, Capital Seminary, and Graduate School. LBC Philadelphia location has programs for busy working adults in accounting, business, Bible, communication, ministry, community transformation, and social engagement, human services, criminal justice, healthcare management, and more. Connect with LBC and Capital Seminary today by visiting lbc.edu/Philly or call 215-280-6339.
You're back on WWDB 860 AM in Philadelphia, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, The Real, Atlanta, Georgia. I am interviewing my best friend for 27 years, who's been my wife for 26 out of the 27 years, Reverend Benita Weathers. She wrote a book, The Screen Within: Mental Health and Clergy Marriages, Journey of a Pastor's Spouse. So let's take the listeners on the radio and those who are viewing through the Facebook Live page. When God gave you this vision to write the book, what apprehensions, one, did you have in writing the book, and how did you overcome fear of writing this book?
So the apprehension that I had was that something in the book would if you read it would maybe trigger you, which is something that I did not want to do. I think, you know, when you're caring for somebody who battles depression, one of the things that you don't want to do is to trigger them in some way. So, you know, because there's enough out there to cause, you know, that can cause triggers. And so you don't want to be the catalyst of a trigger. So I was really nervous about that part. And I also didn't want to write something that others, you know, people could use against you or me for that matter. You know, so it was just a lot of that was kind of going on, even though, you know, the Holy Spirit really had told me to years prior to write it. And so what helped me to get over it really was finally getting up the courage to talk to you about it and tell you, you know, I'm thinking about writing this book. And your response, you know, which was, you got to write it. You know, you have to write that book. It was as if the Holy Spirit was confirming it through you, because that was my main concern, was that I don't want to do something that's going to hurt my baby. You know, that really was, you just don't know. Like, I just really prayed about that. And God kept saying, I got this. I got you. He's going to be all right. But those words coming out of your mouth, you have to write the book. They weren't coming from you. They literally were coming from the Holy Spirit. And even when you said, even though you said, you know, I might not be able to read it, you know, but you have to write it. I'm glad that you finally got to a place where you could read it and get through it and get something out of it, you know, even yourself.
Yeah, so I really was at a point, I almost told you I'm going to call my lawyer, have your lawyer call my lawyer, and then we'll be able to negotiate, you know, how much you can write and sign a non-disclosure contract. You know, no, so for those who don't know, corny jokes aside, for those who don't know, what I love about us and the journey that we take, we don't discourage each other. You know, we encourage each other. And we are big on, if God provides a vision, who are we to say don't do it? And, knowing the journey that you were on, and, we talked about this at times. I don't know if you remember, I remember you saying to me, you have a fellowship of pastors that you could go to. This was in the early phase of ministry. And I remember you almost in tears saying, but I don't have that. I don't have that sounding board,
Yeah.
I remember that, and that crushed me, because I want to be the protector of you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you have those sounding boards now. And so, when the Lord allowed you that, not allowed you, but God placed that vision in you to write it, I was like, no, it has to be written. But at that point, I'm still dealing with the low self-esteem issues of having this,
Right.
And feeling like a villain, that I'm not a villain, but feeling like the villain, that I'm causing, uncomfortability within my own household because I have this mental ailment called depression. That's about it, huh?
Right.
Mental ailment called depression. And so, but no, I was glad that you were able to touch many lives through the reading, through the writing, and those who are reading the book. The sounding board, that was another chapter. I'm not going to go through all the chapters, viewers, because I want you to get the book. But, the sounding board. The one thing I learned, which I felt bad about, he's like, babe, you ain't got to feel bad. What I felt bad about is how I felt like you were my sounding board, but I felt like as a sounding board after reading the book that I was draining you more instead of, how can you say, energizing you. You know what I mean? And we just talked about this recently. In relationships, when you have a spouse that's willing to listen, where especially as a Black man, you're told to suppress everything. You can't express how you feel because you don't want to appear to be weak, or you don't want to be a punk, or you don't want to be this or that. And then you finally get in a relationship where somebody is willing to listen but not judge you, or throw it up in your face, or use it against you, or try to tear you down. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was being enabled by your sounding board, because instead of getting therapy, right, you became, what's the right word? The excuse not to get therapy. Because I got my wife. My wife is my sounding board. So I can just dump it all on her, not intentionally, but not thinking. I could just dump it all on her without understanding the impact of what I'm dumping on you. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that you mentioned a little bit ago was about how I didn't have that sounding board where you had other pastors. I didn't feel like I didn't have relationships like that with other pastors' wives. And a lot of times with pastors, I use the term spouse because there are female pastors who have spouses. A lot of times in particular, I think when the man is a pastor and they have a young family, the wife is more concerned about kind of taking care of the children,
right,
while you're pastoring and doing whatever things that pastoring requires. And so there's not time often really to cultivate relationships, because everybody's running around with their kids in this sport and that sport and this, this thing and that. And you don't really get to cultivate those relationships. I'm at a place now where I am intentional to develop relationships with other women, and particularly other women, and not necessarily pastors' wives, but I'm glad that I do have now relationships with other pastors' wives, in particular pastors' wives who are also ministers,
right?
Because that's a different dynamic than just sort of being the pastor's wife. So that was one, I had to be intentional about that. But before I got to that place, I didn't really feel like I had anywhere to go. And so there again, there's the scream within. And so what was happening was, you would come and kind of offload things that were going on which I didn't mind. But what would happen is they would just kind of, you know, with a sounding board, the sounds vibrate, they like bounce off. Right. But in this case, it didn't kind of bounce off. They just kind of kept, hitting. And then I was keeping all of that stuff without anywhere to go to offload it myself. And, for some reason at that point, not now, but I wasn't at that point necessarily thinking about therapy for myself. Like I can go get a therapist. So, and that could be the person I can offload with. I wasn't even thinking along those lines until later, where I really just had an emotional kind of breakdown in public, that it was like, I really need to see somebody about this. I need to go someplace where I can kind of offload some of those things that were, because it was not just it would also be, the kids would also have their things that they're going through, and they would talk to me about it. And so even moments where I would come home and literally all of y'all would be like, babe, I need this, mom, I need this, mom, it was kind of like, wait, just being able to say, wait, stop. I need, just give me 10 minutes to just breathe and just go and, just to get to a place where felt like I could say that. And as much as you say to me and have said to me, babe, when you need that time to yourself, just let me know. Just let us know. Let us know when you need, time or space or whatever it is. But yet I still wouldn't do it, because I still felt like I needed to in some way, I don't know if I felt like I needed to be everybody's savior. Like I just felt like I needed to protect my family, and that was my way of protecting. So I never took you up on it.
Yet.
Yeah, it's coming though.
Yeah, I'm doing, like I said to an officer of our church who we're real close to, walked in the church and says, hey, when are you going to take off? And I says, okay, you either schedule that day off, I'm gonna schedule that day for you. And I say that out of love, and I say that out of love for you also, is that there comes a point where you need a day away, a couple days away, a week away. And I ain't giving you no month.
That'd be too much.
Yeah. You can get a Lily Grant, get a sabbatical leave from your other. No, but all corny jokes. It's like, no, you need that. And for those who are listening, when I said, let me know. My wife knows, like, when I need that time, when I need to study, I said, babe, I need to carve out this time, because I'm the type of person, I need to go in the room and process, think it through before I say anything. You never want to say anything abruptly, because words hurt and words kill. So I need to just, I need to step away. Let me think about something, or let me just take a walk, or let me go to the gym, etc. So, yeah. Wow. I got a few more minutes for a station break. When there's a part in the book where the screen within, where there's a flipping. You got me? There's a flipping.
Yeah.
Where the flip is, I'm not going to you as the sounding board. You now come to me.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that flip?
Yes. So for a long time, I wouldn't come to you with things that were concerning me, because I felt like, one, as a pastor, you already had a lot on your plate. And so for me to then add to that, I felt like just didn't make sense. And also, I also, there were things that I didn't, again, like, I didn't want to, trigger you in some kind of way. Now that I have a better understanding, and now that you also have the tools that you need, and you're, to handle different kinds of situations, it's easier for me now to come to you and say, when I need counsel. And so there was that, there have been many times now, but there was that one time that we were we had gone to a church service, I think, and we just stopped to get a bite to eat afterwards. And there's a lot going on with me at my job at the time. And there was just a lot. There's just a lot going on. And I was able to I was able to kind of offload on you.
Well, I had to pull it out of you. I had to pull it out of you because it's kind of, I'm sorry to cut you off. It was interesting because looking at the book, reading your book, and then looking at the situation, it was the same scenario, but it flipped. So you're like, when I was going through my depressive moments or moments of depression, I would try to keep it from you or keep it from the kids, but you could pick up on the body language. Something's not right. And so I can remember that day. I'm not going to give free advertising in the restaurant that we were in unless you gave advertisement. But I can remember the restaurant that we were in, and I could tell you wasn't you. I could tell you wasn't you. And whatever was going on, you were trying to keep it from me. Not that you couldn't confide in me, but you were trying to keep it from me because you felt I already had too much on my plate. And I remember I remember that judo flip that day. Yeah,
I do too.
So before we go any further, let's take our last station break on WWDB 860 AM in Philadelphia, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, the real Atlanta, Georgia. We're taking our last station break.
You're listening to Conversation Unplugged on WWDB with Reverend Dr. Wayne Weathers, brought to you by Lancaster Bible College, Capital Seminary, and Graduate School. LBC Philadelphia location has programs for busy working adults in accounting, business, Bible, communication, ministry, community transformation, and social engagement, human services, criminal justice, healthcare management, and more. Connect with LBC and Capital Seminary today by visiting lbc.edu/Philly or call 215-280-6339.
Wow, we're back on Conversation Unplugged on WWDB 860 AM in Philadelphia, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, the real Atlanta, Georgia. I'm interviewing my best friend, my baby, my wife, Reverend Benita Weathers. Wrote the book, The Scream Within, Mental Health and Clergy Marriages, Journey of a Pastor's Spouse. So you get asked this question a lot in interviews. And I want to ask this question. I already know the answer because I want people to say, oh my God, I don't believe he put her on the spot like that. I wouldn't have done that to my spouse. No, some spouses wouldn't have stayed in the journey. They would have just gave up because it would have been too much. Why didn't you give up?
Well, because I genuinely love you. I genuinely do. And your good characteristics far outweigh the challenges that you have with depression. And even the challenges with depression are things that could be worked through, as you've shown. Like since you've been in therapy, oh my gosh, you have grown by leaps and bounds. So if I had given up, I would never have gotten to really experience all of this goodness, with you.
Right.
And so, I looked at I saw your, the good things about you more so than anything else. So, yeah, that is why I stayed. That I wouldn't give up on our whole relationship because you're dealing with challenges that you're trying to get control of.
And so what you saw was the majority good. Flip the script. My first therapist, Dr. Michael King, God said, psychotherapist as well as pastor, he diagnosed me as fatalistic mentality. And fatalistic doesn't mean like I'm gonna go jump off a bridge and commit suicide. He said fatalistic mentality is you take the 20% and blow it up like it's 80% when it's really small. So my imperfections that I was seeing within myself, and I was hard on myself, and that's from some traumatic experiences and everything, I'm blowing it up. It's really small. It's minute.
Right.
but I blew it up like it was 80% when it was really only 20%. And that's been the journey from, you know, this particular therapist, with my first therapist to my next therapist and everything, is to be able to see the good in the greatness. I remember the therapist I have now, Earl, he said to me one day, he says, you know what your problem is? He says, you don't know how to enjoy the fruit of your labor. He says, once you accomplish a goal, you just go right on to the next.
Yeah.
Learn how to enjoy the fruit of your labor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah. Now, when you said I love you, I was going to just jump through the Zoom, just give you a kiss. Because you don't. But anyway.
You could just ran upstairs. No?
Radio show down over. People get to see a glimpse of just how crazy and corny I am when it comes to just you just, that's what you do to me anyway. What's next? You know, what's next on your agenda? Or maybe agenda is not the best word to use, but the book is gaining traction. You know, you've been invited to various interviews, whether it's internet, radio, podcasts, workshop, presentations. You know, I don't know if I should be selling your autographs or anything, but yeah, you know, God is really opening doors for you. Where do you see yourself going now?
Yeah, so I am in the process now of putting together a full-blown workshop that'll be used with churches for on this topic of you know, making mental health care a family affair. And a vision that I had when I wrote the book, one of the things that I hoped would come out of it would be that in churches, and not even just churches, really faith communities, other faith communities can also use this as a model, but I would like to see mental health communities start to take place in churches so that people can feel comfortable coming in a group setting and talking about mental health, talking about, you know, being proactive about their mental health, just like you are about physical health. Everybody, you know, you learn that you're supposed to get your physical once a year. Well, you need to check in on yourself. You need to think about your thinking. You need to, and if you need someone who is licensed and trained, if you need someone at that caliber to help guide you, pray about who to go to. There are lots of choices out there. Make sure, you know, every therapist is not for everybody. So, you know, find one who meshes with you, with your core beliefs, and with who you are, and get the help that you need. So I'm really wanting to get that message out to the masses, even internationally. I did a podcast with some people that are over in New Zealand, and you know, I did an international webinar a few months ago in that broadcast in various countries. And so I'm really hoping that this will take off, not just here in the US, but all over. And, you know, I want to go and speak on this in different, on different platforms and different places, even bigger than where I am now. So that's my hope.
So you taking my depression, and now you just getting global, don't you know that's just so true?
I'm taking my journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So no. I'm real. Let me say this as we get ready to close out. I am really proud of the accomplishments that God has allowed you to make. And I am so grateful to have you as my best friend and my wife. And I am so blessed to have someone who was willing to take this journey, not to destroy me, but to help build me up. And I appreciate that, the journey that we've been taking. A lot of others, you know, could say that they would not have been able to get through this wilderness, but you would not allow me to settle for a mediocre mindset. in order just to succumb to this. You never pushed, you just encouraged. And I really needed that. So any other books you have on the horizon?
I definitely do have other books. Not that I'm ready to speak about at this point, but I actually have a whole list of books lined up to write.
Yeah.
But I have to say this before we go, that that encouraging part and all of that goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a one-way thing. You have been just as encouraging to me over these years, and you're encouraging in all of the things that I've done, and going back to school, in ministry, in all of the places that I'm called to go. You are supportive of, and I definitely appreciate that. So I need to make that clear, that it's not just all about, oh, I'm encouraging you, but it definitely goes both ways.
Well, good. So I am going to write a book, and the book I'm going to write is the traumatic experience being married to a spouse who's a Ravens fan when she should be an Eagles fan. Now,
go ahead and write it. No, I'm with the right bird.
Oh my God! I gotta call my therapist. I feel the pressure coming on right now. I feel the pressure coming on. We just had a great interview, and you just caused this trauma into my life. I am so traumatically affected by what you just said.
Well, your team did blow out a practice team, so you know.
So you had to go there. Anyway, I'm going to call the producer to cut you off. Well, hey, babe, love you. Really
love you too, sweetie.
Love what you're doing. And, you know the saying, we say this to each other, you be faithful over a few, God will make you ruler over many. You've been faithful over a few of the talents that God has given you, and he's making you ruler over many. So the doors are busting wide open for you. So
thank you.
We have not seen where God's taking you, but we know God is taking you somewhere. So that's it for today on Conversation Unplugged on WWDB 860 AM, as well as WWWE 1100 AM, the real Atlanta, Georgia. It was an honor and a blessing to interview my best friend, my wife. I know my daughter's going to throw up. Our youngest is going to throw up on this. My boo, you remember that? Yeah, but
yes.
Yeah, but again, thank you for being on Conversation Unplugged, and we'll have you come back because we know there's other initiatives that you're working on, and we want to hear other things that you're doing, especially your consulting business and things like that. All right. And to my listeners, thank you for tuning in to Conversation Unplugged. It's been a blessing to talk to you, Reverend Benita Weathers, The Screen Within, Mental Health and Clergy Marriages, Journeys of a Pastor's Spouse. We'll get that information up for you later so you can go purchase the book as well. All right. Take care and
get it anywhere you buy books.
All right. Take care and God bless.